I'm wondering what is true at Morningstar now. When Gary Hamel did that article in Harvard Business Review, First Fire All the Managers, I think that's about 2010 and 2012, and that a whole ripple, that article still ripples out there in conversations.
Yeah.
And I wonder how over this time that just working in an organization like Morningstar would inherently widen the conversation ethically.
Yeah. I'm really curious. If I had more time, I'd love to go back, or next time I travel there, because I'm really curious about that question.
Yeah.
It seemed to be almost absent when I spent 3 days there doing my research, which was interesting to me. And I'm just curious, 4 years down the line, what has happened.
At the same time, to emphasize, following Bucky Fuller, that to be able to bring a new model, to prototype something new, and then to even institutionalize it, as we're now doing with next stage organizations, that in itself has an impact that in the larger systems that one's new model is nested within holonically, that just the impact of that we must not underestimate, and that there is a lot of historical support for how much difference these models can make. And that's part of, so the reinventing organizations conversation of the last 4 years is not only propelling this kind of developmental acceleration within organizations, but the larger conversation about social systems and reinventing societies, and what kind of development will that take. So if we look at some of the research that's reported in the And Everyone culture, if we look at that, it's a very small percentage of people that are at the self-transforming level. So the center of gravity, at best, in the circles we're likely to be working in, is at the self-authorizing level. So we know that if a next stage or teal organization is in a context in terms of social systems and societies, in an authoritarian context, that the contradictions between the organization and the social system within which it's nested are going to be difficult for people. And whatever the individual development limitations are around how inner authority is constellated, those contradictions are going to create intense anxiety. And what we do with each other when anxiety hits a particular threshold. I'm wondering if you have come upon some examples of a falling back, a regressing that has happened in some organizations, which were finding traction in the new breakthrough practices you have written about. And then things get hard environmentally in their sector, or a new government comes in or reinforces its authoritarian governance, like, for example, Turkey or Hungary. And what then would happen to organizations that had begun to cross over?
It's an interesting question, and I have no examples of that kind of regression. So the examples I have of regression have always been, the CEO changing, and a new CEO coming in that has a more traditional view on things and then moves the organization backwards. And there are quite a few of these cases being documented. I haven't seen, I could imagine, but I haven't seen any case where the outside system would have put so much pressure that you would go back in. My sense is, like, so many of these organizations seem to thrive sometimes to a ridiculous degree and seem to be weathering difficulties so much more easily that I think there's also something where they sort of, you know, as if the immunity system was boosted. And there's a sense that they can tackle and can take quite a bit. You know, the numbers don't capture it, but you know, just simply, you know, this organization that I just given this example of, you know, the margins go from 2 to 3% to 15%. I've heard quite a number of stories like these. I mean, you know, suddenly these organizations seem to be really resilient, and I'm talking from a financial point of view, but behind that is all of that resiliency, you know, all of that capacity to innovate, to adapt, to draw on the creativity of so many people, that I think you could also make the opposite argument, that when you have a very tough environment, those might be the organizations who know how to adapt and how to thrive.